Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We're standing out in these corn stalks and we were just thinking, if we're going to plant corn again in ground like this, we're probably going to have some insect pressure. We're going to talk about corn insecticides and what strategies you might use to stop those nasty bugs.
We'll also talk a little about wheat seed treatments today. It's not just fungicides, it's several other categories as well, and we want to cover all that today.
We've got one of the worst weeds I could possibly imagine, especially if I'm raising wheat on my farm. We'll talk about how to stop this tough weed if we can. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how legumes fix nitrogen. So first of all, what are legume plants?
Well, when we think about legume plants, we're talking about crops like alfalfa and soybeans and clovers. There's just a number of different crops that can actually have the ability to work with bacteria in the soil to bring nitrogen from the air into the plant.
Yeah, because that's one of the things, when you stop and think about it, why can't plants get their own nitrogen? There's all kinds of nitrogen in the air. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, when you think about our atmosphere and being over 70% nitrogen, and then you also think about the main fertilizer that we need for crop growth is nitrogen. We need the most pounds of nitrogen. It just makes a lot of sense that, wow, if we could just take it out of the air, that'd be perfect. And also, why are people so worried about the word fertilizer and think that it's such a terrible thing when most of the air that we're breathing is mainly nitrogen?
Right, it contains the exact same stuff that we're putting in the ground. So anyway, with this fixation of nitrogen, what ends up happening with the legume plants is they will excrete sugars into the soil, and bacteria like to eat those sugars, so they get closer to the root system in order to eat more of the sugars. Then they will colonize actually on the root system of a legume plant, and they will pull nitrogen out of the air and convert it over to a form that the plant can use. And you say, well, what's the bacteria get out of this? The bacteria gets that food. The more nitrogen the bacteria is pumping in, the more sugars the plant is pumping out. So it's a great deal for the bacteria, and also it's a great deal for the plant because it gets its nitrogen without a farmer having to go out and fertilize and apply a bunch of nitrogen.
Well, again, here's another word that most people would think of as a negative word, bacteria. Oh, we don't want to have bacteria. Guess what? There's a lot of bacteria out there that is actually beneficial for our crops and for us as humans. You think about what's going on in your digestive system and all those little things that go to work for you every day of the week. It's the same thing out in fields. Bacteria can certainly work in conjunction with plants to help them grow better, and it helps the bacteria and it helps the plant.
So to this point, there are only these legume plants and a few other plants that have basically figured out this way to create their own nitrogen. But what researchers are working on today is, well, how about if we got corn that could do that, or wheat that could do that, or any of these other crops that need lots of nitrogen throughout the season? Wouldn't that be great?
This is something for corn farmers and for wheat farmers. Their biggest expense every year in terms of plant food is putting nitrogen out for the crop, and they've got to put quite a bit of it out there. So this would be a fantastic thing if researchers could figure it out. The other side of it is when we look at soils, they can only hold so much nitrogen at any one time. If we had bacteria that could just produce a little bit every single day of the growing season, that would be so much better for our environment. It'd be so much better for our farmers in terms of profitability. And of course, it would be better for our country in that we could produce much more food and use up less resources.
We talked about some of these legume crops that can produce their own nitrogen, like alfalfa and soybeans. Fortunately, our weed of the week can't produce its own nitrogen. Can you identify this week's weed?
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello design chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
You can put more bushels in your bin without expanding the farm with Yield Track. The new 24-row planter from Titan Machinery features the Case IH Early Riser planting system. Yield Track will take you to the field first with extra flotation come spring. The tracks eliminate pinched rows and reduce compaction. All 22 and 30-inch Yield Tracks come loaded with Case IH technology, including cable drive and AccuRow. Grab more bushels from every acre with Yield Track from Titan Machinery.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grit sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
When it comes to wheat seed treatments, we're trying to control diseases, we're trying to control insects and help our wheat get a better early start, but the bad thing, Brian, is there just aren't very many choices.
I know, it's just so disappointing. I mean, I look at the sheet and there are only 37 choices on this particular sheet. This is put out by some university.
And there's probably only another half a dozen
right.
coming out this year.
Well, yeah, plus they're missing about at least a dozen. Plus then you've got the combinations of this product and that product. So basically, it's probably a million combinations.
Yeah,
So,
there are a lot of different ways you can go. Now, we're only talking about the fungicides and insecticides. We aren't even talking about all the biologicals that you may consider
and
using for your farm
hormones
too.
and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, this is a big topic when we start discussing wheat seed treatments. But here's the main thing we want you to focus on. Okay, we've got three basic categories: fungicide, insecticide, and we'll just call it biological, even though some are plant growth hormones. We'll just lump that all together as biologicals. Let's start with the insecticides because that's the simple discussion. We're talking here about Cruiser, Gaucho, and Poncho. The only real question is how much of which one are you going to use? So I don't really care which you pick. I just want you to make sure that you're using the right rate for the insects you may have.
That's the big thing. All three of those products can be effective. They can be highly effective on a lot of the bugs that you may be facing. However, if you have extreme pressure of wireworms, and we're starting to see that, especially in the continuous wheat areas, we're using the highest labeled rates of any of those products and still struggling a little bit. The challenge is we just don't have any liquid insecticides that are labeled to drop in the furrow. I mean, there are plenty that are safe, but they just aren't labeled. And that's very frustrating for farmers. And so we're just forced to use the highest labeled rate of these neonics that we can, and then do the best job with foliar treatments for all the other bugs we've got out there. I think the odds are pretty good that using the higher end of these insecticidal seed treatments is going to give you a good return on investment.
Okay, so the insecticide choice was pretty easy. When it comes to the fungicide choice, that's where it does get a lot more difficult because we have all these choices. There are several different chemical families that are involved, several different products that you could use, and just about every major company now has a product choice or two for you. So Syngenta has something, BASF, Bayer, there are other companies as well. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do and what diseases your crop might be facing. But a lot of farmers now are going with two different fungicides out there just to try to prevent some disease resistance and also to give a much broader spectrum. It doesn't cost that much money to put fungicides on your wheat. You're probably looking at $2 to $5 an acre. It's no real big deal. the main difference that we see here is the treated acre versus the untreated acre. So what I'm trying to tell you is the politically correct answer here is, many of these seed treatment fungicide products are fairly similar. It's just we want to make sure you're using a fungicide compared to no fungicide. And the big problem here is a lot of times on the farm we try things, we try it for 1 year in 1 or 2 fields, and we base big decisions on our little bit of experience with that. What I want to tell you about these fungicides is quite often you're going to get zero net gain. Okay, it's not going to pay for you. But on the other side of things, that $3 or $5 or whatever you invest in the fungicide, sometimes it's going to pay off in 5 to 10 bushels of wheat. In other words, I'm just trying to tell you that you only need to hit 1 out of 5 years, maybe even 1 out of 10 years on this fungicide deal, and you've paid for all your fungicide every year. Because no one knows what diseases are going to show up in a given year. No one knows what kind of environmental conditions we're going to have. We just don't know. But we do know that we're seeing more diseases now thanks to less tillage and just the fact that in some cases we are gaining higher yields. So we just want you paying attention to which products I should use, but the main thing is just use something.
And this isn't going to replace your foliar fungicides that we're going to be using. We're not protecting that way, but we do need to protect that root system.
Well, it's not just the roots, it's the seed and the seedling. And so it can be, for the first couple of months even, you might gain some residual, but for sure a month after that crop has emerged, you're still getting a little bit of activity out of that good fungicide seed treatment.
What I was getting at, Brian, is when you think about a wheat plant, everybody likes to focus on, how tall is that wheat going to be? Is it going to be waist high? Is it going to be, knee high, thigh high? Where are we at with the wheat? There's all kinds of plant growth above ground. There's almost that same amount of plant growth below the ground too that we're trying to protect.
Well, let's talk now about the last category, which is the biological products.
The foo-foo dust, right? We're talking foo-foo dust now. That's how our dad always used to look at this, because he said, I don't know if the science is good enough, and he was probably right back in the 80s that the science probably wasn't that good, that we didn't have a lot of good choices out there. The science is much different today, and we do have some decent choices.
Yeah, but let's put it this way. When you start thinking about this category of biological products that, it can't really be real, do you really think that all these big companies like Syngenta and Monsanto and BASF would invest billions of dollars buying all the biological companies they have over the last 2 or 3 years if it didn't pay, if there wasn't some science to it, if they didn't have some hope there that this was going to be something that was really good for the farmer and something that was going to make them money and make the farmer money? I mean, I just look at this and say, yeah, not every biological product is going to work, but at least try some stuff in your farm. I'll tell you, on our farm, in our wheat, we use Quick Roots every time because we've shown that it pays. Not that it's necessarily going to pay for you, but we just want you trying something and understand that all the big companies are really focused on biological products. You're going to see a lot more of them in the next 10 to 15 years.
The point is not that you have to use these products on every single acre or anything like that. We just want you to keep your eyes open, try a few things out on your own farm, work with your neighbors or friends. Okay, you try this and I'll try this, and we'll kind of compare and see if either of us got any gain, and take a look at the plants throughout the season. It's just a great opportunity to learn, because it doesn't cost much to use seed treatments or different at planting time treatments in wheat. And the gains that are potential gains anyway are pretty great.
Well, once again, seed treatments really can pay on your farm. It's important that you're looking at a lot of these things if you're going to gain more net profit each year. But another very important thing for you on the farm is getting great weed control. We'll tell you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show.
Your equipment's ready. The seed's in the barn. You have a strategy to overcome the challenges you'll face, and your crop protection products are pretty well locked in. But maybe you still haven't finalized your fertilizer plans. If not, visit agroliquid.com today. With products formulated for superior nutrient uptake, unsurpassed application flexibility, and proven by years of extensive research, this may be the season to take your yields to the next level using agriculture liquid fertilizers.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave P. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
At Case IH, our equipment doesn't just meet the standards, it set them. With industry-leading SCR engine technology, Case IH gives you more power while still meeting tough emission standards. In fact, the Steiger 620 is the highest horsepower tractor to ever come off the assembly line. And all Case IH equipment is agronomically designed to help you maximize your yield potential and your profits. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready? Learn more at caseih.com/efficientpower.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. When we were growing up on the farm, Dad was always concerned about our safety. So there were some large animals he didn't want us around. Don't go around the bull, but you can work with the calves. Or don't go around the boar, but you can go with the little pigs, or whatever the case may be. One of the things in the shed where he had seed and chemical, Dad was always concerned about us being around corn insecticides. He said, wow, you really got to be careful around that Thimet and around that Diphenate and around that Counter and Furidan. Yep. And there were really some harsh products back in the 70s and 80s. All those products are gone, Brian, and now today
gone, or they're applied in packages that don't allow much human contact, like Counter I think of, and whether it's lock and load or smart boxes or something like that, it's just enclosed systems. But yeah, we are lucky to have the pyrethroid family of insecticides now, so you can use Force, for example. I mean, the pyrethroids, they come from a flower. It's much safer to humans.
We have some really safe choices, at least relatively safe for humans, and also safe out in the environment. So things have changed quite a bit in this game. So if you're thinking about planting corn and using an insecticide, that's a good thing, and we'll talk about which products to choose. If you're thinking, instead of that, I'm going to choose another alternative, I'm just going to use a trait, you may rethink that decision a little bit.
Well, the reason why is because we're seeing a lot more rootworm resistance to single trait BTs now. Now, we're talking about whether it's Yield Guard or Herculex, any straight single BT, that's what we're seeing issues with. In our area, for example, where we farm, if you don't use at least 2 traits and some insecticide, most likely your corn's going down. It's not a real good deal. But nevertheless, we still have some rootworms that are controlled by these single BT traits, so some guys are trying that and going full rate insecticide. But what we advise you to do if you're in an area that has any rootworm resistance at all is go to double trait. You can go to a Smart Stacks corn. There are all kinds of choices out there that are Smart Stacks, so you're getting 2 different rootworm traits, and even if a bug is resistant to one, hopefully it's not resistant to the other.
Well, and the other thing to think about too is when we're talking about these rootworm traits, they don't control every insect out in the field. There's no trait out there that's going to stop all the wireworms. There are some traits that will have some activity on cutworms and others that won't. There's just a ton of other bugs that could impact your seed. White grubs, we don't have BT products that stop them. I mean, if you've got any of those other insects, you really need to be using some insecticide too. Now the question is, do I use a half rate of insecticide with my BT traits? Do I use a full rate or somewhere in between? As Brian kind of mentioned, we're typically using that full rate because we've got a lot of pressure out there. But the other thing that you might think about, even if you say, well, I don't know if my rootworms are necessarily completely resistant, but I know this about BT traits. The bug has to take a bite out of the root to ingest that BT protein. Every time they take a bite, now I have an open wound on my root system where diseases can get in, and now I'm going to see more stalk rot and other problems with my plant growth. If I can use an insecticide and kill 80 to 90% of the bugs before they touch my roots, that could be a good thing too.
Yeah, here's the thing you've got to understand with any of these insecticides, and I don't care if we're talking Force, Aztec, Capture, Lorsban, Counter, anything, the best you can hope for is 90% control on corn rootworms. That's it. You might get 80% control, you might get 85% control, but at best, you're probably going to get 90%. Okay, so if you only have a few bugs out there, no big deal. But boy, if you have a tremendous amount of insects, this is a real issue. So that's why also we talk to farmers a lot about using insecticide consistently over a period of years to keep your populations down.
Now, and many farmers, Brian, that I talked to have bought a new planter over the last few years. Hardly any of them are set up with dry insecticide boxes. So you've got a couple of choices. You can get set up for liquid to be able to apply Capture LFR very easily and pretty inexpensively. That's probably the cheapest way to get into insecticide, and you could already be set up for starter fertilizer. You could potentially mix that Capture LFR right with your starter. The other thing you can do is put a smart box system on your planter, and they're really pretty effective. And like Brian was talking about earlier, now you have a closed handling system, so you don't have to be dumping bags of insecticide and breathing in, that dust and this kind of thing. You just snap those boxes on and it works pretty nice. So those are two of the alternatives that are becoming really popular. And you also have a lot of choices, like in the smart box system, of different products that you can use, which is a really nice luxury too.
As a general statement, Force and Aztec are going to be the best rootworm products, but Lorsban is less expensive as a dry. Also, Capture is much less expensive, and it's a liquid product that may be easier for you to handle. So even though Lorsban and Capture aren't quite as good as Force or Aztec, if you say, well, I'm going to use a trait anyway, and I'll just use Capture or Lorsban, save a bunch of money there, it'll probably come out fine. Our one piece of advice for you though is if you're in continuous corn and you've had lodging problems, you've had rootworm problems in the past, I'd hit it hard and I'd go with Smart Stacks. I'd go with the best insecticide product you can get at the full rate, because if you want top yields on your farm, we talk to farmers all the time that complain about their continuous corn yields. Rootworm issues is one of the main reasons why they don't have the best yield that they could.
Well, there are many reasons to use an insecticide on your corn this spring. Take a look at the different choices that are out there, the different application systems. There are really some safe products to use and some good systems you can implement as well.
Having a good insecticide is important if you want top yields, but so is controlling our weed of the week. We'll tell you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Your farm tells a story, one that continues with the decisions you make. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our weed of the week is jointed goatgrass.
Jointed goatgrass is a winter annual grass, and a lot of times in wheat production, especially where we're talking about winter wheat here, these winter annuals are really tough. If we don't get good control in the fall, it's going to be really tough now in the spring to try and clean that back up in our fields, because they're well established, they're probably already tillered out, and it's really tough to kill them.
Yeah, it is, unless of course you're planting a spring crop, and that's the whole thing. When we start talking corn and soybeans, this really isn't a major issue. Obviously, if you're doing spring tillage, that's going to wipe it out. In corn, we just don't get all that concerned about it because we have Roundup Ready corn, we have Roundup Ready soybeans, and Roundup will clean it up. Now, none of the pre's are going to do real great in corn, so that's where you'd kind of have to come back with the Roundup post-emerge. But in soybeans, Treflan, Sonalan, or Prowl will have some activity, but post-emerge Select Max isn't real great. It's just going to give you suppression at best. But like I say, if you've got Roundup, you don't really have a lot of worries with jointed goatgrass.
If you're in a continuous wheat rotation, you may start out using some Olympus as a pre-emerge product. I know Prepare has got some activity. It's not like it's going to completely clean it up, but at least if you could stop some of that jointed goatgrass, that's a good thing. Then post-emerge, it gets to be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, that's where I'd go with Osprey. It's not going to be perfect, but at least that's the best thing post-emerge. Otherwise, you certainly can use Beyond in clear field wheat. Those are about your only options. I mean, the normal grass killers, you start talking Axial, Discover, Puma, they just don't do a whole lot for you on jointed goat, especially if you spray in the spring.
Well, jointed goatgrass is a tough winter annual grass, so get it under control in the fall if you can. but now in the spring, you may have some challenges.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
Take care of weeds with equipment. It's not a new concept at all, but the piece of equipment I suggest you to use for controlling weeds sure is. I'll explain in today's Iron Talk. Well, you probably guessed by now I'm not talking about using tillage for weed control. My suggestion to improve weed control is to use your planter and plant either higher populations, narrower row spacings, or a combination of both. Crop canopy is still the best weed control measure that we have. When we talk about tough weeds like pigweed control, wow, we don't have good post-emerge options, so we do a great job trying not to let weeds emerge with our pre-emerge herbicides. Then post-emerge, if we have narrow row spacings and thick plant stands, we get a quicker crop canopy that results in less weed competition the rest of the year. I heard this said that pigweeds hate shade. Well, I'll tell you this, all weeds hate shade. And if we can shade them out, we can control weeds easier, cheaper, and more environmentally friendly. So use crop canopy to your advantage with your planter this year. Look at narrower row spacings, higher populations, or both to control weeds. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
For lower cost, higher production, see your Mandaco Agri-Dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport to easy use. 12 to 85-foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 3/8-inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandaco land rollers, improved soil-to-seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss, eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandaco Agri-Dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation, because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Farmers often inject plant nutrients into the seed furrow or even 8 to 10 inches deep in the soil. Such practices protect rivers and lakes by keeping fertilizer safely under the soil where only crops can get to it. For more information, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.